Welcome to the Art Museum. My name is Stephen Gluckert, and I'm the curator here at the museum. And we have 4 very exciting shows at the Art Museum. We usually have between 15 and 20 exhibitions that rotate through the Art Museum during the year. At the current time, we have an emphasis on screen printing. And so 3 different perspectives on screen printing reflect a great deal of the history of screen printing in the United States. And then we have a small sculptural assemblage show by Kelsey Fernkopf. In this room, we have rock and roll posters, and which reflects a lot of the kind of the roots of where screen printing has come from. It was rooted in sign painting and stenciling and stencil sign painting, and so it has a real democratic history that people were advertising something or creating a sale, or there was a commercial route in what screen printing was through the 20s and 30s. And so in this room, we have drawn together a collection of rock and roll posters. And these artists, among them Tom Dwyer, and have roots in Missoula and have done a lot with the screen printing process. And the screen printing process has kind of gone full circle in that it's had this time period through the 60s and 70s where it became a very popular fine art form. But it's still used for silk screening t-shirts and rock and roll posters and advertising. So we wanted to draw attention to the origins of it. So as we look around, we see these posters celebrating Pearl Jam, Mudhoney, a lot of the Seattle bands, the Volumen, punk rock, prom, and so the artists have really taken a simple approach in their designs. Most of these posters are 1 or 2 color, some are 3 color, so each color has to have a screen created for that. And whether that's through a lacquer stencil or a paper stencil, most of these take advantage of those processes. We're thankful that the artists Tom Dwyer and Josh Vanek have been generous in lending these posters for the exhibition. And as you can see, there's some real jewels in here. And we want to celebrate their work as well as many of the other artists that have, contributed greatly to public art or a folk art form. So I think now we can walk into the main gallery and take a look at some of the prints that we have on loan from the Junt Art Museum in Spokane. Well, we are very, very excited and pleased with this exhibition that's in the main gallery at the Art Museum. And there are 55 screen prints here that we have borrowed from the Junt Art Museum at Gonzaga University. And we selected these prints, and there's a real art history lesson. There's also a history of screen printing. So not only examining the medium, but also the things that touched American lives and American artists from 1939 till present. And as I had mentioned before, screen printing was rooted in sign painting and advertising and the stenciling that was used to create sale items or things for sale. And in 1939, 1940, 41, there was a move afoot to create a fine art medium, to do something with this process, which was previously purely commercial. And so this exhibition is like a cross-section that examines all of that. It's pretty exciting. We have some of the first screen prints ever done, and some of the movements that are reflective of a social realism, all the way to something that is more pop, like this Robert Indiana piece, or the Andy Warhol piece, the pop era, and but it also surveys many of the other movements between in American art, such as minimalism or abstract expressionism, or the underlying love of the landscape that many artists have. As we look around here, there are some very well-known artists included in the exhibition, as well as some real obscure artists who contributed greatly to screen printing and the process of screen printing. As you see in this Robert Indiana print, we talked about the stenciling technique, which was about sign painting and commercialization. But all of a sudden it becomes a fine art process. There's a limited number of prints, and there's a limited number of expressions. So in 39, 40, 41, that became a move afoot, and there was a real search in America for a uniquely American style of painting and art form. So this was on the tail end of the Depression, and there was also a real desire to make art affordable too, fine art affordable, and mass-produced but not mass-produced, handmade, and all of these prints very definitively handmade. Oddly, we're kind of in a lull in the history of screen printing. All of the recent exploration that artists have done in the contemporary printing techniques, and that computers have been able to reproduce things. Printmaking has advanced to a great deal. So not as many screen prints are being done today as, say, in the 70s and 80s, which I look at as kind of the golden age of screen printing. And screen printing was very labor intensive, and it was extremely dirty and messy, and a lot of times the chemicals were very toxic. Of artists had health consequences from using lacquers and handling all the glues and cleaning out all the screens and reusing the screens. And while it was an affordable printing technique, and you could reuse the screen, and you could print cheaply, sometimes the costs were not all financial and were measured in the impact on health. And there aren't a large number of editions ever created with screen printing because of the nature of the medium, nature of screen printing. As we look around, there's some really important artists here. There's the Campbell Soup Can by Andy Warhol, of course Robert Indiana. This is a piece by Will Barnett, and as we walk through, we see that these are all really different, but they're reflective of our American roots. So this is a Liechtenstein piece. As we walk around this way, we can see one of the very first prints created by Anthony Valonis. And Valonis was a an artist who was very passionate about creating a fine art form from screen printing. And this print is from 1939. And the first screen print show, of which Anthony Valonis was instrumental in creating, this print was in the first exhibition of screen prints that was celebrated and drawn attention to as fine art. This piece, of course, is done by Jacob Lawrence. So the show has a real mix of probably artists that people are not that familiar with, but are really important as far as establishing this whole medium and respect for it as a fine art expression. And then Jacob Lawrence, of course, from Seattle, probably a person that most people are familiar with. This is a silkscreen print of the revolt on the Amistad. And this piece actually had previously been here, I think in 94, 95, and Jacob Lawrence, of course, is no longer with us. But as you see, the same kind of characteristics that we see in rock and roll posters and we see in Katai, screen printing lends itself to the use of big, bold, flat areas of color, being able to line up and register those colors next to one another, that there's a real flatness about them. And that's a characteristic of the printing technique. So, and there's different methods of printing. Like this was probably a stencil that was created through lacquer, adhering lacquer onto the silk. And these early prints by Anthony Valonis were done with a method which used what was called tush and glue, and tush being a medium that you could paint directly on the screen, and then you squeegeed glue over. The glue dried into the silk, and then that created your stencil. You washed out the water-based tush, and then you were able to screen. So each piece of paper is then registered, or each color is registered and printed. So this is a 4-color print. It's pretty impressive for the 1930s, and a printmaking method that made it accessible. One of the things you'll notice in some of these early prints, like Anthony Valonis, is they really attempted to emulate painting or the handmade. And you'll sense that you can feel these little brush strokes or these little ink-like lines. And that was one of the, reflects one of the desires for it to be really fine art, is that it emulated painting. And as you see some of the later pieces, such as Jacob Lawrence and Andy Warhol and Robert Indiana, you see an approach that harkens back to the history of screen printing being a sign-making process, but also takes advantage of that whole examination that we went through in the 60s and 70s of pop art being advertising, that we need to examine our own signage and advertising as fine art. And Andy Warhol, of course, made us examine all of those issues. This is a silkscreen print. It's one color by Mark DeServio, of course a very well-known sculptor and artist. This is a little more obscure artist also. This is from 1945, and this is reflective a lot of the social realism with which that artists were doing at the time. You know, there was social realism going on and landscape painting, and then at the very same time, this rise in abstract expressionism. And as we go through here, we'll see some of that as well. I had mentioned included in the show are artists that the public will be very familiar with, such as Robert Indiana and Andy Warhol. And this is also another artist that people will be very familiar with. And this is Ben Shahn, and we're very fortunate to have this piece included as well in the show. This is a two-color silk screen, and he has his chop block signature up there on the left. And this is his credo, and it talks about his never giving up your conscience or your what's inside or your ideas. And and next to it, oddly, here you have this artist who's very well known, very much a narrative artist, and very much steeped in the roots of social realism in the United States. And next to him is this artist who totally obscure, Anna Berry. And this print is from 1945. And as you see, this has that painterly quality that a lot of the early silk screens attempted to emulate. And it has the love of the landscape, the love of nature. And so I think we're very, very fortunate to be able to have this show where we're able to draw all of these comparisons, not only in the printing process, but in some of the contrasts and the paths that we've taken in American history, art history. One of the things we were just talking about is being able to contrast pieces that are next to one another. And while screen printing has this history that's related to advertising, it seemed as though when the pop era occurred and screen prints really reached their height, their pinnacle, there was not an abandonment of making a political statement. And that's one of the things that you'll witness in here, is not only the love of the land and the landscape and abstract expressionism, or prints about minimalism, or movements that affected American art, but there's also this connection, just like we were examining the rock and roll posters, about getting the message out. And silkscreen, moving into a fine art form, also has this aspect about it where there are political statements being made, political figures being celebrated. And this is also a Robert Indiana piece that celebrates and draws attention to one of his heroes, and that's Jimmy Carter. Next to it is a print from 1945, and this is by Leonard Pitlack. And as you can see, this also has a political message about it, or something about social realism and social concerns. So this is the title of this is "They Serve on All Fronts," and celebrates a MASH unit, essentially, so from World War II. And as we move into the next show and we examine R.B. Katai, we see him taking a slightly different direction in the use of message and politics and things that were going on in the 70s and 80s. So we should take a look at that next. This exhibition, we had talked about content and political content in work in the June collection in the main gallery. This is in the upstairs gallery. And there are 15 screen prints included in this exhibition, and all of them were created by the artist R.B. Katai. And Katai was an American artist born in 1932, and for much of his life has lived in England and overseas. He's traveled extensively. These 15 prints are part of the Poindexter collection, and they're on loan from us from the Yellowstone Art Museum. And the significance about the Poindexter collection celebrates abstract expressionist art, and it's a large gift that the state of, from the Poindexter family to the state of Montana. As we look at these 15 prints, you see that these are slightly different than some of the prints that we've already seen, such as the rock and roll, which have a very hard edge and large areas of print and color that are have a very distinctive message. And as we see in the June collection, we've surveyed a lot of different kinds of printmaking that have gone on throughout the history of screen printing. And Katai, this whole series captures a moment in, also a moment in American history, where we look at these screen prints and there's a combination of screen printing techniques that he's using in each one of them. Some are paper cuts mixed with photo stencils. He's incorporated collage into some of these and really layered the imagery and mixed up the imagery. So in the same way that writers and there's a tradition of stream of consciousness writing in the United States, there's also a tradition or a connection to stream of consciousness art. And R.B. Katai, along with, say, Robert Rauschenberg, probably took advantage of these kinds of conducted messages, is what I would say, where you'd pull together and contrast and pull together maybe idea opposites within prints to show some contrast and some, not only in color, but in composition and in content. So there's a lot of randomness about the composition, but they're all very calculated as well. So we're very fortunate to have this to complement the other two screen printing shows here at the Art Museum. And the other show that we also have here at the Art Museum contrasts all three of these shows as well. So I hope we were able to take a look at that next. As I had mentioned before, the Art Museum's mission is to celebrate and draw attention to contemporary art and artists of the region. And we've just looked at 3 screen print shows with very different feels about them. And as we schedule the shows during the year, we have between 15 and 20, we try to offer something for everybody in the museum. And so in this gallery, we have the artist Kelsey Fernkopf. And Kelsey is an artist from Olympia, Washington. And these are, as you can see, small-scale sculptures. And he is really consistent about his approach to art and what he's using. So the title of this exhibition is Horse Pop, 2 words. And what we see here is an artist putting things together, assembling. And while that tradition is very old in the history of art, this is definitely a contemporary expression and a contemporary use of putting things together. As we look at this piece, this is boot and plank, and we see that he's using Depression-era ceramics, but he's also using plastic. And one of the characteristics or language of this artist is that all of the edges and the compositions are very clean and crisp, and they're put together in such a way that they feel very labor-free. We've noticed in the screen printing, where with some of the screen printing and painting, we feel the labor of the artist, and we feel things being manipulated or the medium being manipulated. And one of the characteristics of Kelsey's work is that he, they feel real easy. Maybe a little obsessive in being put together, but there's not, you don't sense that there's dirt under his nails in constructing these. And the other characteristics, so they're small scale. As you look at them, the colors, he's really sensitive about the colors and composition that he's putting together. They're very clean, and he limits the amount of metaphors that he's using. So he doesn't elaborate too intensely in what the compositions are. So in this one, he's using a horse head, Depression-era plate, a boot, and a plank. So of the hundreds of us who are thousands, millions of us who are artists, and we would be given the same materials, we'd come up with something. Each of us would probably come up with a different composition. And I think what's special about this exhibition is this artist's consistency and his exploration of limiting the number of metaphors and the way he puts things together. This is a fun show, and we're really happy that this is here to contrast the other 3 exhibitions that we have in the museum right now. I hope that all of you will take in the exhibitions. There's something here for everybody, and we're going to list our website, and please check out the educational opportunities that we have here. Our tours are free. You can call to schedule a tour. We do offer classes that are related to each of the exhibitions. We have openings scheduled, and we also have artists who are going to come and talk. And Kelsey will be here actually March 27th at 7 p.m. Scott Patnode will be here talking about the Junt art collection on March 7th at 5:30 p.m. And there's a whole slew of activities related to these exhibits, and I hope that you'll contact the Art Museum and participate and come down and join us and enjoy yourselves. We'll see you at the Art Museum of Missoula, 335 North Patty,